I'm using the BMW Boxer series, the R1200 and 1250s, to talk about crash bar systems and skid plates specifically, since they're the most critical crash protection on any motorcycle. But even though I'm looking at the BMWs, this is going to apply to a Tenere 700, to a Tiger, to an Africa Twin, to any other motorcycle that you're using for adventure riding. It's the principles I'm dissecting, not necessarily the specifics of these particular crash systems on this motorcycle. The SW Motech system on this bike is one I started using years ago on my rental bikes. It's a lightweight system made of stainless steel, which means when it does hit the ground, it's not going to rust. And that's a common building material that's really nice. It mounts to the frame, which is something I'm looking for no matter what kind of motorcycle I'm putting protection on. I want it as stable and sturdy as possible. So it's not just a mounting on the top, but I'm looking at as many brace points as possible. That way when it falls down, it doesn't deform or flex. The OEM or the stock protection that you can get from BMW for this bike is not braced at the back. And one of the big criticisms is when somebody takes a hard hit, it can bend back and hit up against the valve covers here. And that's ultimately what you're trying to protect. Whatever motorcycle you ride, take a look at what's going to leave you stranded in the woods if you have a fall. For most bikes, it's going to be your radiator. If you're on an Africa Twin, a Tenere 700, it's going to be the radiator. On the big GSs, on the Boxers, it's going to be this valve cover. That's one of the downfalls of this system, is it leaves a nice big open window here. So if this bike falls over, it can hit on this valve cover. That means it has to have secondary, more protective cover to protect that as well. That adds a little bit of extra weight. This is also an independent protection system. The SW Motech attaches to the bike up above, and the skid plate attaches separately. The challenge with many of these manufacturers is that a lot of the bikes we're riding now off-road use the engine as a stress member. There's not a frame at the bottom, or there's very little frame to attach a skid plate to. So they end up attaching it to the motor, which always runs the risk, if you take a hard enough hit, that it can damage or fracture the motor. When they have the crash systems up here that mount to the frame, what a lot of manufacturers have done is switch to allowing that skid plate to attach to the upper crash bars. That's a great way to look at things. Let's go look at one of those. On my GS Rally, I've been running the Altrider system. This Altrider system is a step up in protection for sure. It's much larger diameter protection. It still mounts at the points 2 below and 2 above. And instead of wrapping a bar around the back of the head or back of the valve cover here where I can hit my shin, they run the bar up and across the back of the motor. Unfortunately, this still ends up catching my shin in a lot of situations. It does leave that same Achilles heel, that same problem that I saw on the SW Motech, and that is this entire valve cover is still exposed. If I tip over sharp rocks, that's really going to be something that has to have some additional protection. So I have a full cover on this to keep this bike protected. The other thing I do like about this bike is that when you look at the bottom of it, when you look down here, the skid plate is a very long, very significant protection. It runs from the back all the way back to the catalytic, and the skid plate braces on the crash bars and also braces back where the center stand mounts, and that gives a lot more protection. It does make some limitations for center stand, and because I use this a lot off-road, I just eliminated the center stand completely. It's one less thing to get caught up on. Great system, well protected, well proven, but still not necessarily perfect. The third crash system I'm using here is the Outback Motortek. And the reason I'm switching from the Altrider and from the SW Motech is all those things I mentioned. Again, no matter what bike it is, what crash system I'm looking for, I'm looking first of all for what the protection is. How well is it going to protect the bike? And one of the things that this system does, the others don't, is they've already protected the valve covers. Now keep in mind, the disadvantage is if I need to pull this valve cover for any reason, I have to remove the crash system to do that. But the truth is, you're probably going to have to do that on those other bikes if you're doing a full service anyway. So that's not going to make that big of a difference to me. Also, the way they fold the pipes, they come back and around, they miss my shin on the outside, and they wrap up and over the top of the valve covers inside, and they're out of the way. So again, no matter what bike you have, what system you're looking for, mobility is one of those things that matter to you, and it's going to be different for every person. Christina uses the SW Motech on her bike. She doesn't ride as aggressive. She's not as tall. It's not a problem for her. It's a problem for me. Also, I do like to bounce my bike off of things. The Outback Motortek stuff connects the skid plate to the crash bars, which is a big deal for me on any bike that has a engine stress member or lacks a frame underneath it. They also have several bracing points to add additional rigidity so that if the bike falls and hits hard, it doesn't push back or flex. And I think that was a really nice touch for them. The black is a great color to blend into the bike. But I'm talking about protection in general. And so keep in mind, no matter what you're looking for, one, does it protect the bike in ways that you need it to be protected? I don't put upper protection on the GS because the chances of me hitting that radiator or leaving myself stranded are pretty low. And adding all of that additional weight is, the only thing it does is make my wallet lighter and the bike heavier. And it's probably not going to protect the bike much anyway. So I try not to put on any more than I actually need. Also, if protection will create more, I don't have to buy secondary protection for the valve covers. The crash bar themselves do that job. That's a plus for me. It keeps my wallet a little fuller and I can spend more on gas and I can do more travel. That's a win. And again, certainly for the skid plate, how much protection is there? This one is more than double the weight of that SW Motech. The SW Motech was around 4 pounds. This one with the brackets is almost 11 pounds. If there's one place I'm going to add weight on a bike with protection and not worry about it, it's the skid plate. It's the lowest point on the bike. It's not going to throw your balance off, and it's the one part that's going to get a ton of abuse. The only time it matters is when you're trying to push your bike out of the mud and get things going. All of these protection systems were purchased and things I've used. Thanks for helping keep this channel free of sponsors and free of influence and just my experience. And remember, attitude matters and you should smile while you ride, but it's not the attitude that, hey, I'm on a motorcycle and this is a lot of fun and so I'm always smiling. No, no, no. I'm talking about when your bike is upside down and you're testing all your crash protection, when the turn signal's laying beside you and you're wet and mucky and miserable, that's when attitude matters. Because remember, you did it on purpose because we call it fun. Thanks for watching. See you next time.